Welcome to Ready for Readiness Lesson 4. In Lesson 1, you learned about the definition of prevention and you gained an understanding of the 9 levels of readiness. In Lesson 2, you learned about the Readiness Assessment Model. In Lesson 3, you learned about the Ohio Domestic Violence Network's Creating Safer Ohio Campuses initiative and how the readiness assessments fit into the program plan. In Lesson 4, we'll walk you through the process of conducting key informant interviews for the readiness assessment. Lesson 4 is about the specific steps that must be taken to conduct the readiness assessment on campus. We'll discuss the dimensions of readiness and how they relate to the 9 levels and 3 phases of readiness. We'll think through how to recruit key informants for readiness assessment, and finally, we'll walk you through how to conduct a key informant interview. Let's begin with the assessment steps. The steps in the assessment process are actually pretty straightforward and include identifying key informants who will be interviewed, conducting the interviews, and then transcribing and reviewing interview notes. Once the assessment interview is completed, both the interviewer and a second rater will engage in processing information gathered from the interviews to determine where your campus is on the readiness scale. Now let's look more closely at each step, beginning with identification of key informants. Identification of key informants is paramount to having the initial assessment provide meaningful information about where the campus is in terms of readiness for prevention. While determining the method for the selection of key informants, keep in mind who is your campus audience. How will you identify the most important students, faculty, and staff for this project? Who's most likely to engage in the process of building for prevention? And how many people will you invite to participate? Additional considerations for choosing your informants will be their credibility, their reliability, level of leadership qualities, equal gender representation, cultural diversity and inclusivity, connectedness to the campus, the community, and finally, their level of working knowledge about relationship and sexual violence. One methodology for identifying key informants is to interview 2 each from the following groups: students, staff, such as campus security, Title IX coordinators, or administrative assistants, faculty, both full and adjunct professors, and administrators, such as the Dean of Students, the Dean of Academic Affairs, or other administrators on campus. While determining who to recruit, avoid potential identifiers by requesting more than 1 member from each group of administrators, faculty, staff, and students. A key aspect of the interview process is to ensure confidentiality and anonymity. Also, consider the cultural context of your campus and strive to make sure that the populations within your community are equally represented by who you select for interviewing. Another important aspect for consideration is that there will inevitably be drop-off in participation. As people are unable to participate and leave this process, is your group maintaining its diverse cultural identity? Recruitment approaches that worked for other Ohio campuses included equal gender representation and also choosing people of color. However you select interviewees, be sure you do it with the community and end user in mind. Another key to identifying key informants is to engage the Title IX coordinator or Dean of Students on campus to help. Have a face-to-face conversation, phone conversation, or an email exchange with one or both and brainstorm a list of possible recruits. Then, create a short list of identified key informants for interviewing. Once you have your list and the alignment of the Title IX coordinator or Dean of Students, you can begin making contact and letting key informants know they've been recommended for an interview. Informal ways to make contact might include warm handoffs from friends or acquaintances that already have established relationships. Send an email as an initial point of contact and then follow up with a phone call. When leaving voicemails for respondents, be sure to leave your name, the purpose of your call, the date and time of your call, and specific instructions for following up with you. Conversation examples and talking points have been provided to help you engage in conversations about campus readiness while you conduct your interviews. Talking points will help you to introduce yourself, illustrate how to state your purpose, explain the process for campus readiness, help you to show your appreciation for the responders' participation, and finally, the talking points will help you understand how to ask for additional recruits. Prior to contacting potential key informants, be prepared to discuss the following. Understand how the readiness assessment process ties to your own organization's mission and vision and your own work as a professional. Why you are embarking on measuring campus readiness. The purpose of the readiness assessment. Why this project is important to you, and what your stake is in the process. How you see the key informant playing a role. And explain that the process entails a 1-hour interview, evaluation throughout, and then a follow-up assessment 2 years into implementation. Ask the key informant for a commitment, and finally, ask who else on campus they think might be a good candidate for interviewing. Before you engage in your first interview, practice the questions with someone you know. Be strategic and enlist help if you're not that confident in your abilities. On the day of the interview, give yourself plenty of time to arrive. Plan ahead for potential setbacks, and be sure to dress appropriately. As a reminder, the point of the assessment is to provide a score, according to the 5 dimensions, that will reveal where on the 9 levels of readiness your campus resides. Once the campus has a score assigned, you'll know where to begin your efforts for engaging the community, developing a plan of action, and how and when to evaluate the program for successes or necessary changes. The 5 dimensions of the assessment are A. How knowledgeable the campus community is about current and existing efforts to stop violence. B. Is a reflection of how integrated awareness is among campus community members and organizations. C. Is a measure of prevailing attitudes that lead to perceptions of safety and campus climate. D. Is an indicator of how resources are allocated or not for the creation of comprehensive prevention strategies on campus. And finally, Dimension E reflects how well campus leadership understands the issues of relationship and sexual violence and how willing they are to lead by example. Now let's talk about the nuts and bolts of conducting the readiness assessment and obtaining a campus score. For every interview conducted, there will be 2 people, called raters, to help process the information gathered in order to ensure accurate findings for your campus's level of readiness. That being said, now is the time for the first rater to reach out and schedule the initial interviews. The next step is to actually conduct the interviews. Record the interview whenever possible, and be sure to let the interviewees know that you will be recording and that everything said during the interview is strictly confidential and that all recordings will be destroyed at the completion of the assessment process. Immediately following the interview, it's imperative to transcribe your notes so that no information gets lost. Create a document that contains as much of the interview details as possible, including exact quotes from the key informant. Now that you understand the interview process, it's time to meet with your Creating Safer Ohio Campus's project staff. They will help you to answer questions, address concerns, role-play interviews, demonstrate the scoring process, and follow up with you as needed. As you embark on this journey, we want to remind you that ODVN, along with its partner agencies, is committed to helping you select and implement prevention activities and strategies that are appropriate for your campus's stage of readiness. Thank you for your time, participation, and commitment to creating safer Ohio campuses.